This is the story of the day that Santa cried.
Princess Ow was a most beautiful little girl. Most of the time she was smiling and singing. Of course, she wasn't really a princess. That was her daddy's nickname for her. He called her Princess because he loved her so very much. He called her Ow because she had a habit of crying ow whenever she might fall or bump into anything. And so her daddy called her Princess Ow. Her brother Jay was a year older than she. He was taller and very strong. He liked to play ball and to swim and to skate and to build things. Most of all, Princess Ow and her brother Jay liked to play in the backyard under the weeping willow tree. It was there that Wanda, the good little fairy, would visit them. Oftentimes, Wanda would send them off on the most wonderful adventures with the help of her magic wand. One day, and not so very long ago, Princess Ow and her brother Jay were playing in their backyard near the weeping willow tree. Suddenly, they heard the good fairy's voice. "Good morning, children," she said. "Good morning, Wanda," they both cried together, looking up on the weeping willow tree, trying to find her. Then, when they saw her, Jay asked, "Tell us, Wanda, is there really a Mr. Rumpelstiltskin?" "Well now," the good fairy answered, "why do you ask me that?" Princess Ow answered, saying, "Last night Daddy told us a bedtime story about Mr. Rumpelstiltskin. He told us that Mr. Rumpelstiltskin was the head of all the little elves that work for Santa Claus, making toys and taking care of his reindeer." Then Jay said, "And he told us that Mr. Rumpelstiltskin knows when children are bad, and that he puts a black mark after their names in a big book for Santa to see." "Oh, he writes down the good things you do, too," Wanda the good fairy said, "like when you play nicely together and share your playthings and do as your mommy and daddy tell you. He puts a black mark after your name when you are bad. He puts a red mark after your name every time you do something that is good." "Just like Daddy said," Princess Ow exclaimed. "But how does he know?" the children asked excitedly. "Well now, maybe you can both find out," teased Wanda. "Would you like to go to the North Pole and see Santa's home and the workshop where the elves live and work, and meet Mr. Rumpelstiltskin?" Wanda asked the two children. "Oh, yes, yes," they both shouted. And in her excitement, Princess Ow tripped over the handle of a toy lawnmower that Jay had been playing with. "Ow!" she cried. Wanda said, "Get ready," and she waved her magic wand. A great number of tiny glittering stars always appeared when she waved her wand. In an instant, they were at the North Pole, standing deep in the cold, cold snow. "Brrr," said Jay, "I'm cold." "Ow," said his sister, "I'm frozen." Then Wanda waved her wand once more, and quicker than Tuffy the kitty comes for a saucer of milk, the children were bundled in warm winter clothes. In front of them, they saw 3 big buildings and the gaily colored North Pole. The house in the center is where Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus live, Wanda told the children. The building on the left is the reindeer stable. The building on the right is where Santa's elves live and work. The sleigh pad is for Santa and his reindeer to use for takeoffs and landings. Walk over to the big building where the elves are working, and you will get a big surprise, the good fairy said to her two little friends. When they reached the door, Jay struggled with one of his heavy mittens so he could knock. His sister pulled on it. Off it came, and Princess Ow went tumbling in the snow. "Ow!" she cried. Then, before her brother could knock, the door was flung open, and there, standing in the doorway and chuckling merrily, was the jolliest little elf you ever could hope to see. Come in," the jolly little elf said. "And welcome to the North Pole, Princess Ow," he said, bowing very politely. Then he shook hands with her brother and said with a jolly little laugh, "And a hearty welcome to you, Jay." "Are you Mr. Rumpelstiltskin?" Jay asked. "Well, you bet the weeping willow tree in your backyard that I am," the little man said, laughing gaily. "Oh, how do you know we have a weeping willow tree in our backyard?" Jay asked. "And how do you know when we are good or bad?" Princess Ow asked excitedly. "You shall see," Mr. Rumpelstiltskin promised, as he led them into a huge building. Then Wanda, the good little fairy, who had entered in her own mysterious way, once more waved her magic wand. The children's winter clothes disappeared, and again they were dressed as they had been. Then Mr. Rumpelstiltskin introduced Princess Ow and her brother Jay to each of the little elves in the workroom. Each one stopped working long enough to bow politely to Princess Ow and to shake hands with her brother Jay. Then they would return to their work. My, but they were busy as little beavers, making toys and games and dolls for good little boys and girls. As they worked, they whistled merrily. Then Mr. Rumpelstiltskin took them to his very private study, where they saw a bright, clear television set. "That is my magic television set," Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. Then he added, "I can tune in on any boy or girl I want to, anytime, anywhere I want to. That's how I know when you are good and when you are bad." He tuned his magic television set in on two boys who were playing together. "So that's how you know," cried the children. Suddenly, one of the boys on Mr. Rumpelstiltskin's TV screen reached over and took a hat off the other boy's head. The second boy began to cry and picked up a pail and hit the other boy with it. "Oh, mercy me, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. "Tommy and Terry are fighting again." He opened a big book on the table near his magic television set. Then he made a big black mark after each of the two boys' names. "Oh, mercy me, Santa will be so unhappy when he sees all the black marks," the sad Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. Then Mr. Rumpelstiltskin, remembering his two young guests, began to smile again. "Now you know," he said, "how I know when you are bad or good. I tune in on you children quite often, you know, and you never can tell when I'm watching you." He chuckled gaily, and then he said, "Come now, I'll show you the reindeer and the stables." He led them down a flight of stairs to a series of tunnels and stairways, and explained to them, "These stairways and tunnels save us from going out in the cold. They connect all the buildings together." Then he led them up another flight of stairs and opened the door. There the children saw 8 of the tiniest and prettiest reindeer you could imagine. Mr. Rumpelstiltskin let the children pet the reindeer and feed them some oats. Then he led them back down the stairway. But this time, he took a different turn in the tunnel. Once again, he led them up a flight of stairs. This time, he knocked on the door. "Come in, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin and Princess Owl and Jay," said a deep, jolly voice. Mr. Rumpelstiltskin opened the door, and the children saw Santa Claus. Oh, how excited and wonderful they felt to meet Santa face to face in his very own house. Their little cheeks were flushed with excitement, and big smiles lit up their faces. "Well, well, well," Santa Claus exclaimed as Mr. Rumpelstiltskin ushered Princess Owl and her brother Jay into the big cheery room. "It's mighty good to see you, Princess Owl. And it's mighty good to see you, Jay," Santa Claus said as he extended his hand. The children both shook hands with Santa Claus, and then he said, "I want you to meet Mrs. Santa Claus. She has lunch ready for all of us." The children were introduced to Mrs. Santa Claus. Then, after they had all chatted for a while, Mrs. Santa Claus led them all into a large, beautiful dining room. She had prepared a most delicious lunch, and all 5 at the table ate heartily. While they were eating, Princess Owl asked Santa Claus, "Do you ever watch Mr. Rumpelstiltskin's magic television set?" It was Mrs. Santa Claus who answered her. "Oh, I never let him watch it anymore. You see, he was watching it one day when 2 children began to be very naughty and started misbehaving. Santa was so upset and so sad that he cried." And then Mr. Rumpelstiltskin shook his head from side to side. "Mercy me, oh mercy me, oh mercy me," he said. "None of us will ever forget the day that Santa cried." And Wanda, the good little fairy, perched atop the mantel of the huge fireplace, began to sing.
The golden sunbeams hid behind a cloud bank. The wind began to rustle, and it sighed. Snowflakes floated down from the heavens. The day that Santa cried. The reindeer hung their heads, and they were sobbing. Mrs. Santa turned her tears to hide. All the elves were sad and unhappy. The day that Santa cried. Then children stopped being naughty and behaved as good children should. Santa brushed away his teardrops and laughed as only he could. All the little elves and all the reindeer and Mrs. Santa were so gratified. But they all will always remember day that Santa
There was a silence after Wanda finished her song, and then Princess Owl said, "Oh, dear Mr. Santa Claus, I hope it wasn't Jay and I who made you cry." "Oh, I hope not," Jay echoed. "No, no," Santa chuckled. "Why, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin's big book shows that despite the fact that you have several black marks for being naughty, you have 37 red marks for being very good little children." "Why, that's simply wonderful," Mrs. Santa Claus said. And Santa Claus added, "You are both sure to have a wonderful Christmas." Then Wanda, the good little fairy, said to the children, "Come, it's time for us to go now." Princess Owl and her brother thanked Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus and Mr. Rumpelstiltskin for everything. "Mercy me, oh mercy me, but I'll miss you two children," Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said as he wiped a tear from his eye. "I'll be visiting you on Christmas Eve," said Santa. "Remember to keep on being good children, for Mr. Rumpelstiltskin will be watching you on his magic television set." Then Wanda waved her magic wand, and presto! Just like that, they were back in their own backyard under the weeping willow tree. "Oh, thank you ever so much, Wanda," Princess Owl said to the good little fairy. "Yes, Wanda," Jay said, "thank you very much. That was a most wonderful adventure." "You are most welcome," Wanda answered them. "I shall return soon to take you to meet Rainbow, the Easter Bunny." Then she gradually faded from their sight. But even after she had completely disappeared, they heard her voice coming from high in the weeping willow tree as she softly sang,
Then children stopped being naughty and behaved as good children should. Santa brushed away his teardrops and laughed as only he could. All the little elves and all the reindeer and Mrs. Santa were so gratified. But they all will always remember the day that Santa cried.
This is the story of the Teddy Bear Guards. It's all about how Wanda, the good little fairy, helped Mr. Rumpelstiltskin when he was in deep, deep trouble. One day, and not so very long ago, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin was working with his elves in their big workroom far, far away at the North Pole. Suddenly, another little elf, whose name was Mr. Bean Plucker, came running into the large workroom. "Oh, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin," he exclaimed, "something is very, very wrong. Your magic television set isn't working properly. The picture keeps flipping and flopping, and you can't see anything at all." "Mercy me, oh mercy me," Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. "I wonder what can be wrong." He followed the excited Mr. Bean Plucker back to his den. Now, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin, as you know, is a very, very busy little elf. He supervises all the other elves. He takes care of the reindeer. He makes regular reports to Santa Claus on naughty children, and also on children who are very good. He is a very, very busy little elf, and oftentimes he has to ask some of the other elves to watch his magic television set and to make the necessary black or red marks in his big book. Now there was something wrong with his magic television set, and he frowned in puzzlement as he hurried to his den with Mr. Bean Plucker. When they entered the den, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin saw that Mr. Bean Plucker was right. The picture on his magic television set was flipping and flopping, and it was impossible to see a picture of any kind. Mr. Rumpelstiltskin tried the magic dial. He tuned in Syracuse, New York, Dallas, Texas, Jasper, Arkansas, Clark Summit, Pennsylvania, Hampton, Virginia, and a dozen other towns and villages and cities. But no matter where he dialed, the result was the same. He could not get a clear picture. "Mercy me," he said. Mr. Rumpelstiltskin sat back in his rocker and rocked and rocked. He tried to figure out what could be wrong. There was nothing inside the cabinet that could wear out because there were no wires or tubes in his magic television. You see, it was a very, very special set that the elves had made under the personal supervision of Wanda, the good fairy. Nevertheless, he decided he would remove the back panel and look inside. He sent Mr. Bean Plucker for 2 screwdrivers, and when Mr. Bean Plucker returned with the tools, the 2 elves set about to remove the back panel. They removed 8 small golden screws and lifted off the panel. They set it carefully on the floor. Then they looked into the back of the magic television set, and what do you think they saw? There were 4 small plastic butterflies flying about inside the set. Mr. Bean Plucker reached inside and caught one and pulled it out. "Why, these are ours," he said. "I mean, these are the ones we make. How do you suppose they got in the back of your magic television set, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin?" They caught the other 3 butterflies, disconnected their flying mechanism, and set them all on the table. Then they screwed the back panel on the television set. Mr. Rumpelstiltskin dialed the magic dial. A beautiful, clear picture appeared again. He tuned in Marblehead, Massachusetts, St. Louis, Missouri, Holmesdale, Pennsylvania, Endicott, New York, Denver, Colorado, Elkhart, Indiana, and a dozen other villages and towns and cities. Every picture was bright and clear. Mercy me, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. How do you suppose those butterflies got into my magic television set? Oh, there is no question about it, Mr. Beanplucker said. It had to be Sadpan, the bad fairy. She is the only person who is happy when children are naughty or when she's causing some kind of trouble. I think you're right, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. I wish it were possible to summon Wanda, the good fairy, from her home in Happy Valley at the end of the rainbow. And as if she had heard Mr. Rumpelstiltskin's request, zing! There was Wanda, the good little fairy. Oh, Wanda, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said, I'm in deep, deep trouble, and I'm so very glad that you came to visit me. Mercy me, someone wound up our plastic butterflies and placed them in the back of our magic television set. We couldn't get a picture. Mr. Beanplucker said it had to be Sadpan, the bad fairy. It's all right now, he hastened to add, but how do we know it won't happen again? I agree with Mr. Beanplucker, said Wanda. It had to be Sadpan, the bad fairy. We all know she is happiest when children are naughty or when she's causing trouble for someone. Oh, mercy me. What can we do to stop her from doing it again? Mr. Rumpelstiltskin asked. Now, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin, don't you worry, Wanda said. We'll fix everything. Wanda sat and thought for a minute. Then she asked, what are the largest toys you have in the workshop? Mr. Rumpelstiltskin thought for a moment. I suppose they would be the large, pretty Princess Ow dolls. The dolls that cry ow when you squeeze them. They're the dolls we named after our little friend who visited us, he said. Oh, no, Mr. Beanplucker said. Do you remember when Santa Claus sent out the order for 500 teddy bears, 1 foot tall? And Mr. Fluffy Brain mixed up the order and started to make 100 teddy bears 5 feet tall? He had 2 of them made before we caught him and stopped him. Those 2 big teddy bears are still back in the storeroom. That's right, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. I forgot about them. Would they do? He asked Wanda. Oh, they would be perfect, Wanda answered him. Could you have them brought in here? She asked Mr. Rumpelstiltskin. Right away, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. He sent Mr. Beanplucker to get them. In only a short time, Mr. Beanplucker returned with 3 other elves. Each of the 2 elves were carrying one of the huge teddy bears. Wanda had them place the teddy bears on each side of the magic television set. Then she waved her magic wand, and, just as always, a great number of tiny stars appeared. The elves gazed at the teddy bears. On each of their wrists, there had appeared a lovely, glittering bracelet. They are very magic bracelets, which I call Wanda bracelets for good little boys and girls, Wanda said. Sadpan doesn't dare come near a place where anyone is wearing them. Then she turned to Mr. Rumpelstiltskin and said, Your troubles are over now, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin, as long as you leave the teddy bear guards on each side of your television set. Sadpan won't come near the television set as long as she can see those bracelets. She's afraid of them, you know. Then Wanda disappeared. "Mercy me, oh mercy me," Mr. Rumpelstiltskin said. And that's the story of the Teddy Bear Guards. Right now, this very minute, they are standing there guarding that magic television set. Mr. Rumpelstiltskin, or Mr. Beanplucker, or Mr. Fluffy Brains, or one of the other elves are this minute watching that magic television set. And who knows? Maybe they are tuned in on you this very minute. If they are, I hope you are being very, very good, and that you are minding your mama and daddy. Don't you ever, ever be naughty and be the one to make Santa cry.